The massive alien fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 3,000 warships of different shapes and sizes filled the darkness of space with their presence. Some looked like massive towers of crystal that glowed with inner light. Others resembled living creatures made of metal and energy. The smallest ships were still twice the size of Earth's largest battleships. On the bridge of the command vessel Eternal Judgment, Supreme Legate Vornthal studied the primitive blue world on his screens. He was tall and elegant, with silver skin that reflected light like polished metal. His species had been traveling between stars for over 10,000 years. They had seen hundreds of civilizations rise and fall. This new species called humans were nothing special to him. "Send them our message," Vornthal commanded. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. On Earth, alarms screamed in every military command center. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the underground operations center beneath the Rocky Mountains. She watched the incoming transmission with cold eyes. Sarah was 53 years old with short gray hair and a face that rarely smiled. She had seen things that would break most people. 20 years ago, she watched her colony world burn when pirates attacked. She survived by hiding in a storage container for 3 days. Since then, she dedicated her life to making sure Earth would never be helpless. The alien message appeared on every screen across Earth. Vornthal's translated words were clear and simple. "Humans of Earth, we are the Galactic Concordat. We represent 47 civilized species. We have watched your expansion into space. You are too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous. You will submit to our authority. You will accept our observers. You will limit your military forces. You have 72 hours to agree. If you refuse, we will pacify your world by force. This is not negotiation. This is mercy." The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center for 3 long seconds. "Arrogant bastard," muttered General Marcus Webb from his station. He was younger than Sarah, with dark skin and the build of a man who still hit the gym every day despite his desk job. Sarah said nothing. She pulled up a different screen and typed in a code that only 5 people on Earth knew. The screen flashed red, then green. A single phrase appeared: "Protocol Archimedes authorized." Across Earth, the public response was chaos. News channels showed crowds gathering in city squares. Some people demanded Earth surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight. Politicians argued on live television about whether humanity could possibly win against such overwhelming force. The United Nations called emergency sessions. Religious leaders prayed. Parents held their children close. But while the world argued, something else was happening in the shadows. In the asteroid belt, what looked like ordinary rocks suddenly came alive. Hatches opened in surfaces that had appeared to be natural stone for decades. Weapon systems that had been hidden for 20 years began charging their power cores. These were not simple defense platforms. They were nightmares designed by people who studied every war Earth had ever fought and learned all the wrong lessons. On Mars, in the colony domes, workers suddenly received new orders. They moved to hidden storage facilities beneath the red sand. They began activating equipment that official records said did not exist. On the Moon, inside Tycho Station that tourists visited every day, entire sections sealed themselves off. Military personnel who had been pretending to be civilian workers changed into combat gear. They boarded ships that looked like cargo haulers but carried weapons that violated 3 different interstellar treaties Earth had never actually signed. Dr. James Okafor sat in his office at the Hidden Warfare Research Institute in Geneva. He was 70 years old with white hair and hands that shook slightly from old age. On his desk sat a photo of his family from before the Melbourne incident of 2159. He was the only one in that photo still alive. He picked up his phone and called Sarah Chen. "Is it time?" he asked quietly. "It's time, James," Sarah replied. "Your children are going to war." James closed his eyes. "God forgive us." He hung up and began typing activation codes. Each code would unleash something terrible. Each one represented years of work by brilliant people who asked themselves one question: how do we win when we're outmatched? The answer they found was simple and horrible. You don't fight fair. You don't fight honorably. You fight to win no matter what it costs. The 72 hours passed quickly. Vornthal expected surrender. The humans had only 200 warships in orbit around their world. His fleet had 3,000. The mathematics were simple. When the deadline expired, Earth's response came not through diplomatic channels but through a single transmission. It showed Admiral Sarah Chen in her uniform standing straight and proud. "Supreme Legate Vornthal," she said calmly, "you have made a fundamental error in judgment. You believe we are weak because we are outnumbered. You believe we will surrender because fighting seems hopeless. You don't understand humans at all. We are the species that split the atom and immediately used it as a weapon. We are the species that fought 2 world wars that killed over 100 million of our own people. We are the species that looked at the concept of mutually assured destruction and said, yes, that's acceptable. You thought you were giving us a choice between submission and death. You forgot that humans always choose a third option." She leaned forward slightly. "You wanted war. You're going to get one, but not the kind you're expecting." She looked off camera and spoke 3 words that changed everything. Unleash the shadows. Across the solar system, thousands of hidden systems activated at once. In the asteroid belt, rocks that had been there since the solar system formed suddenly moved with purpose. On Earth's moon, weapons that had been built in secret over decades charged up and targeted the alien fleet. Vornthal stared at his tactical display as it suddenly filled with red warning symbols. Thousands of them. His ships were surrounded by threats they never detected. His intelligence officers were screaming reports that made no sense. The humans had hidden an entire military infrastructure across their solar system. They had been preparing for this for years. How? Vornthal whispered. How did we not see this? His tactical officer, a 4-armed insectoid named Critch, looked at him with all 6 of his eyes wide. "Sir, they hid everything." They disguised military installations as civilian structures. They hollowed out asteroids and filled them with weapons. They built ships that looked like cargo haulers but scan as warships. Sir, they've been planning for this exact scenario for decades. Vornthal felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. Sarah Chen sat back in her chair and allowed herself the smallest smile. "Gentlemen, ladies, and everyone in between," she said to her staff. "Show them what happens when you threaten Earth." The first Concordate ships moved into attack formation at exactly 0600 Earth Standard Time. They approached in the classical pattern their military academies had taught for 3,000 years. Capital ships in the center, cruisers on the flanks, destroyers screening the front. It was beautiful, orderly, and completely predictable. That was their first mistake. The asteroid they designated as Target Reference Alpha 7 was actually weapons platform, Hades 12. It had been sitting in the belt for 18 years, disguised as a nickel iron rock. When it activated, panels that looked like crater shadows folded back to reveal railgun batteries. Each railgun could fire a tungsten rod the size of a telephone pole at 30 kilometers per second. The first salvo caught the Concordate destroyer Righteous Purpose directly through its engineering section. The rod punched through shields that were designed to stop energy weapons, but did nothing against solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The ship broke in half. Atmosphere vented into space in frozen clouds. 247 crew members died in 4 seconds. Before the Concordate fleet could react, 40 more platforms activated across the asteroid belt. They opened fire simultaneously. It looked like a meteor shower aimed at the alien fleet. On the bridge of eternal judgment, Vornthal gripped his command throne as alarms screamed. "Return fire. Destroy those platforms." His weapons officer tried. Energy beams lanced out toward the platforms, but they were already moving. Small thrusters pushed them into new orbits. The platforms were not stationary targets. They were mobile weapons that had been sitting dormant for years, waiting for exactly this moment. "Sir, we're detecting multiple launches from Earth's moon," reported the sensor officer. "Analyzing." "They appear to be cargo vessels." "Ignore them," Vornthal ordered. "Focus on the weapons platforms." That was his second mistake. The cargo vessels accelerated toward the Concordate fleet on what looked like collision courses. Vornthal's tactical AI classified them as civilian ships possibly evacuating. His fleet's point defense systems ignored them in favor of targeting the real threats. When the first cargo ship reached weapons range, its hull split open like a flower. Inside was a weapons system that Earth's military called a Hellstorm battery. 24 missile pods, each carrying 8 anti-ship missiles with nuclear warheads. The ship was a Q-ship, a trap disguised as harmless prey. 192 nuclear missiles streaked toward the Concordate fleet. They were primitive compared to concordate weapons, but there were so many of them that the point defense systems became overwhelmed. Dozens of warheads detonated among the tightly grouped alien ships. The electromagnetic pulses fried systems. The shockwaves damaged hulls. Radiation flooded unshielded compartments. 7 more Q-ships opened fire. The concordate formation began to break apart. "This is impossible," Vornthal shouted. "They don't have this kind of firepower. Our intelligence said they had 200 ships." "They lied, sir," Kirch said quietly. "They hid their true strength. They wanted us to underestimate them." The cyber attack began at 0623 Earth Standard Time. It did not announce itself with warnings or visible effects. It simply appeared in the neural interface systems that concordate crew members used to connect directly to their ships. The Arkshani species, peaceful insectoids who made up 20% of concordate forces, used neural implants that let them think their commands directly to ship systems. It was efficient and fast. It was also a vulnerability that human hackers had spent 5 years learning to exploit. The first Arkshani captain to be affected was Commander Zizisthar, aboard the cruiser Morning Light. He was reviewing tactical data when his implant suddenly fed him something that was not data. It was a thought. Not his thought. Someone else's thought forced directly into his brain. "Your family is dying," the thought said in his mind. He could feel it like it was his own emotion. Terror. Grief. Loss. "No," Zizisthar whispered. He knew it was not real. He knew it was an attack. But his brain could not tell the difference between a real thought and an injected one. He began screaming orders to turn his ship around and return home. His crew tried to stop him. He pulled his sidearm and shot his second officer. Across the fleet, other Arkshani officers began experiencing similar attacks. Some saw their children dying. Others felt convinced that their ships were on fire. A few became convinced they were already dead and this was the afterlife. The human cyber warfare teams had not just hacked the implants. They had weaponized them, turning the Concordate's most advanced technology into a tool for psychological torture. 19 Arkshani ships broke formation and fled. 3 more had to be disabled by their own fleet when their captains went completely insane. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the battle unfold on her displays in the command center. She felt nothing. No joy at the destruction. No horror at what her weapons were doing. Just cold calculation. "Deploy the Kessler swarms," she ordered. "Ma'am, are you sure?" asked her executive officer. "Those are considered—" "I don't care what they're considered," Sarah interrupted. "Deploy them." The Kessler swarms launched from hidden installations on several asteroids. They looked like clouds of metallic dust, each particle the size of a grain of sand. But these particles were nanomachines, each one equipped with tiny thrusters and basic programming. Their instructions were simple: find metal, consume metal, replicate. The first swarm reached a concordate battleship and spread across its hull like a living stain. The crew did not even notice at first. By the time their sensors detected unusual readings, the swarm had already consumed half a meter of armor plating. The nanomachines were breaking down the hull molecule by molecule and using the material to make more of themselves. The battleship tried to burn them off with point defense lasers. That worked on the surface, but thousands of nanomachines had already burrowed deep into the hull structure. They continued eating. The ship's structural integrity began failing. Bulkheads collapsed. Compartments sealed automatically to prevent total hull breach, trapping crew members inside sections that were being slowly consumed. The battleship's captain gave the order to abandon ship. Escape pods launched into space, watching their vessels slowly crumble as the swarm devoured it from within. Captain Marcus Webb commanded the stealth ship Unseen Consequence from his position 3 million kilometers behind the Concordate fleet. His ship was special. It was built using technology that Earth scientists barely understood themselves, based on principles of physics they had discovered by accident. The ship did not just hide from sensors. It actively manipulated the space around itself to become functionally invisible. "Sir, we have targeting lock on the enemy command ship," reported his weapons officer. Marcus studied the hologram of eternal judgment. He could destroy it now, kill Vornthal and cut the head off the Concordate forces. But Sarah had given him different orders. "Target their communications array," Marcus commanded. "I want them isolated, not dead." Not yet. The Unseen Consequence fired a single missile. It was moving so fast that the concordate sensors only detected it 2 seconds before impact. The missile was not nuclear. It carried a specialized electromagnetic pulse generator that fried every communications relay on Eternal Judgment without damaging the hull. Suddenly, Vorntal could not talk to his fleet. He could see his ships dying on his displays, but he could not coordinate their response. He could not call for help. He could not even surrender. "Repair teams, get our communications back online," he screamed. But the humans had planned for that too. Every 30 seconds, another missile from unseen consequence hit the same spot, destroying any repairs before they could be completed. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Concordate fleet had lost 947 ships. They destroyed only 12 human vessels, all of them unmanned drones that had been deliberately sacrificed to make the aliens waste ammunition. Vorntal sat on his command throne, staring at the tactical display with empty eyes. His beautiful fleet was scattered and broken. His crew looked at him with expressions that mixed fear and disbelief. They had never lost before. Never. A transmission forced its way through their damaged systems. Admiral Sarah Chen's face appeared on every screen. "This was your warning," she said. "You came to our home with threats. We showed you what happens when you do that. Your reinforcements are 3 weeks away, we know. They're bringing 5,000 more ships. Good. We need test subjects for our new weapons. If you want to stop this war, surrender now. If you want to continue, we will accommodate you. But understand this, Supreme Legate. You are not fighting a civilization that plays by your rules. You're fighting a species that invented the concept of total war. We don't fight until we're tired. We fight until you're gone." The transmission ended. Vorntal looked at Crutch. "Send a priority message to the Supreme Council. Tell them we need those reinforcements immediately. Tell them..." He paused. "Tell them we made a terrible mistake." The war changed after the first battle. The Concordate expected humans to defend their home system and wait for the reinforcements to arrive. That was what civilized species did. They fought defensive wars on clear battle lines. They protected their territory and negotiated treaties. Humans did not do that. 3 days after the battle at Earth, a Concordate supply depot at Carix 7 exploded. It was deep in Concordate space, over 40 light-years from Earth. The depot supplied 17 different military bases with fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. Someone had infiltrated it and planted bombs in strategic locations. The explosion destroyed enough supplies to cripple Concordate operations in that entire sector for months. Security footage showed the saboteurs. They were human. They wore civilian clothes and had forged identity documents that passed every security check. They looked like ordinary cargo workers. They had smiled and waved at Concordate soldiers right before they activated the bombs and escaped in a stolen shuttle. Supreme Legate. Vorntal reviewed the footage in his temporary headquarters on the Concordate fortress world of Talgrim. He had moved there after Eternal Judgment was too damaged to serve as a proper command ship. The fortress world had defenses that could stop entire fleets. It should have been safe. How did they get there? He demanded. How did humans travel 40 light-years and infiltrate our depot? His intelligence officer, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Milanth, pulsed with colors that indicated stress. "We believe they've been placing deep cover agents throughout our space for years, sir. Possibly decades. They may have infiltrated us before we even knew they existed." That was true. Earth's intelligence services had been playing a long game. Every human merchant ship that traveled through Concordate space carried a few special passengers. People who were trained to blend in, to watch, to learn, and to wait. When the war started, those sleeper agents activated. On the industrial world of Praxis 3, the water treatment plants began malfunctioning. The water was not poisoned. It was not deadly. But everyone who drank it started experiencing vivid nightmares. The nightmares showed them their worst fears in perfect detail. People stopped sleeping. Productivity collapsed. Riots broke out as paranoid citizens accused each other of being responsible. The Concordate military investigated and found microscopic machines in the water supply. The machines did not kill. They just released specific chemicals that affected brain chemistry and induced night terrors. It was psychological warfare at its purest. The Concordate had to evacuate 3 million workers from Praxis 3 and shut down the factories there. On the entertainment world of Velis 9, something stranger happened. New videos started appearing on their version of the internet. They looked like normal entertainment programs. But hidden in the visuals and audio were patterns that human psychologists called mimetic hazards. The patterns were designed to stick in your memory. Once you saw them, you could not stop thinking about them. They made you question things. They made you doubt your government. They made you wonder if the war was really necessary. The Concordat tried to delete the videos, but they spread too fast. Millions of citizens had already watched them. The doubts began spreading through the population like a virus. Protests erupted on 12 different worlds. Citizens demanded to know why they were fighting humans who seemed more interested in pranks than genocide. Captain Marcus. Webb stood on the bridge of unseen consequence as his ship glided through Concordat space like a ghost. They had traveled deep behind enemy lines, all the way to the capital system of Talgrim. His mission was simple but insane. He was going to make an entire planet go crazy. Approaching deployment range, announced his navigation officer. Launch the Whisperers, Marcus ordered. 6 small satellites deployed from the ship's cargo bay. They were so small and so stealthy that Concordat sensors would never detect them. They drifted into position around Talgrim, forming a network that covered the entire planet. When they activated, they began broadcasting on frequencies that affected the auditory processing centers of most Concordat species. The broadcasts were not words. They were sounds that the brain interpreted as voices just below the threshold of conscious hearing. Whispers, suggestions, doubts. Over the next 3 days, every person on Talgrim started hearing things. Voices that told them they were being watched. Whispers that said their friends were plotting against them. Sounds that seemed to come from empty rooms. The voices were different for each species, tailored to affect their specific brain chemistry. Mass paranoia swept through the capital world. Government officials accused each other of treason. Military commanders heard whispers telling them their subordinates were planning mutiny. Ordinary citizens locked themselves in their homes, convinced that everyone outside was an enemy. The Concordat Supreme Council met in emergency session, but even they could not trust each other. They heard whispers suggesting that some council members were secret human sympathizers. Meetings dissolved into shouting matches. Decisions were impossible. Marcus watched the chaos unfold from orbit. He felt sick. This was his mission, but seeing the results made him question everything. These were not soldiers. These were civilians being driven mad by weapons that attacked their minds. "Sir, we should leave before they locate us," his executive officer suggested. Marcus nodded slowly. "Set course for the extraction point. And, Lieutenant, log this mission under Protocol Brutus. Command needs to know what these weapons really do to people." Protocol Brutus was the classification for missions that crossed ethical lines. It meant Marcus was having doubts about whether this kind of warfare was acceptable. Dr. James Okafor received Marcus's report 3 days later. He read it in his office in Geneva, his hands shaking more than usual. He had designed the Whisperer satellites. He had created the mathematical models that predicted exactly how the broadcasts would affect different species' brains. He had tested the theories with computer simulations, but he had never imagined the reality. Millions of innocent people driven to paranoia and fear, families torn apart by manufactured suspicions. A civilization eating itself from within because humans had weaponized the very concept of trust. He opened a bottle of whiskey he kept in his desk. He had not touched alcohol in 15 years, not since his family died. He poured a glass and drank it in one gulp. Then he sent a message to Admiral Sarah Chen. "We need to talk about limits." The Concordat reinforcement fleet arrived 2 weeks later than scheduled. They had been delayed because their ship's artificial intelligence systems started malfunctioning. Navigation computers gave wrong coordinates. Life support systems reported false emergencies. Weapon targeting systems locked onto friendly ships instead of enemies. The cause was a virus that human cyber warfare specialists had inserted into Concordat computer networks months ago. It was dormant until the reinforcement fleet activated. Then it spread through their systems like wildfire. The virus did not destroy anything. It just introduced small errors into everything. Errors that accumulated and cascaded until nothing worked properly. When the fleet finally arrived, 80% of their ships had to be quarantined and completely rebuilt from the operating system up. The remaining 20% were combat capable but deeply suspicious of their own computers. Crews had to manually verify every command, slowing their response times to a crawl. Admiral Sarah Chen broadcast a message that was received across the entire Concordat territory. She appeared on every screen, every display, every communication device. The Concordat could not block it. The virus in their systems made sure the message played. "Supreme Council of the Galactic Concordat," Sarah said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. "You sent 5,000 ships to destroy us. We thank you. We've already claimed 800 of them for Earth's Navy. Your AI systems belong to us now. Your ships are our ships. Your weapons are our weapons. You brought them here intending to conquer us. Instead, you've equipped us for our next phase of operations." She leaned forward. "But I'm going to give you something you didn't give us. A choice. Surrender now and negotiate peace, or continue this war and discover what Phase 2 looks like. I promise you, Phase 2 is worse. Much worse." The transmission ended with a simple image, a list of Concordat worlds with countdown timers next to each one. The message was clear. Humans had infiltrated all of these worlds. They had assets in place. They could strike anywhere, anytime. Vornthal watched the transmission from his quarters on Talgrim. The planet was still recovering from the Whisperer satellites. He still heard phantom voices sometimes, even though his doctors assured him the satellites had been found and destroyed. He did not trust his own thoughts anymore. He realized something that filled him with horror. The humans were not trying to win a military victory. They were trying to break the Concordat's will to fight. They were attacking morale, trust, sanity itself. This was not warfare as he understood it. This was something from humanity's violent history, something they called total war. The idea that everything was a valid target. Soldiers, civilians, infrastructure, psychology, culture, everything. "We made them desperate," Vornthal said to his empty quarters. "We threatened their home. We forced them to choose between surrender and extinction. We forgot what desperate people are capable of." In the Supreme Council chambers, the debate raged. Some members wanted to continue the war. Others wanted immediate surrender. A few suggested using forbidden weapons that the Concordat had kept locked away for thousands of years. But they all knew one terrible truth. They had started a war with a species that was better at war than they were. Humans did not fight according to rules. They fought to win, and they were very, very good at it. 6 months into the war, Earth declared victory. The Concordat fleet was scattered and broken. Their worlds were in chaos. Their government was paralyzed by internal conflict. Humanity had won against impossible odds using tactics that no one expected. But the victory tasted like ashes. The war crimes tribunals began on Earth before the peace treaty was even signed. News channels showed footage that made people sick. Concordat soldiers screaming as nanomachines ate their ships around them. Civilian populations on Talgrim driven mad by psychological weapons. Children on Praxis 3 who could not sleep because of the nightmares the contaminated water gave them. The footage came from human soldiers who had leaked it. They wanted the world to know what had been done in Earth's name. Elena Rostova stood in the United Nations Assembly and gave a speech that was broadcast worldwide. She was 60 years old with white hair and a face lined by years of humanitarian work. She had spent her life helping refugees and victims of war. Now she was looking at images of new victims. Victims that humans had created. "We won," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "We survived. But at what cost? We used weapons that torture minds. We deployed machines that eat people alive. We drove millions of innocent civilians to madness. We did things that our own laws call war crimes. We became the monsters we were fighting against." Half the assembly applauded. The other half booed. Earth was dividing itself over the question of whether the victory was worth the price. Captain Marcus Webb sat in a military courtroom facing charges. His crew had mutinied 3 weeks earlier when he received orders to deploy a weapon called Scorched Protocol on a Concordat colony world. The weapon would have rendered the entire planet uninhabitable for 300 years. Marcus refused the order. His crew supported him. Now they were all facing court-martial for insubordination during wartime. Captain Webb, the military prosecutor, said, "You were given a direct order by your superior officers. You refused. Do you deny this?" "I don't deny it," Marcus replied. He was still wearing his uniform, but without insignia. The order was illegal and immoral. Scorched Protocol would have killed 4 billion civilians, children, families, people who had nothing to do with the war. "I will not follow orders that make me a mass murderer." "The Concordat threatened to destroy Earth," the prosecutor argued. "Your orders were necessary to ensure our survival." Marcus stood up. "Sir, the war was already won." The Concordat was beaten. That colony world was defenseless. Using scorched protocol would have been genocide. And I will not commit genocide even if ordered to, especially if ordered to. The courtroom erupted in argument. Some people supported Marcus. Others called him a traitor. The military judges looked uncertain. They knew this case would set a precedent for the entire armed forces. Dr. James Okafor testified at the tribunals as an expert witness. He explained in technical detail how each weapon worked, how the Whisperer satellites affected brain chemistry, how the nanomachines consumed matter, how the psychological warfare compounds in the water supply triggered specific fears. "Did you know these weapons would cause this much suffering?" asked the chief judge. James looked at his hands. They were shaking badly now. He had stopped trying to hide it. "I knew in theory. I ran simulations. I studied the models. But knowing intellectually and seeing the reality are different things. I thought I was creating deterrence. Weapons so terrible that no one would dare attack us. I never imagined we would actually use them. Or that they would work so well. Do you regret creating these weapons?" James was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that we needed them. I regret that the Concordat forced us to choose between using them or dying. But do I regret creating them? No, because without them, Earth would be ashes and humanity would be extinct or enslaved. My conscience is dirty, but my species is alive. I'll carry that burden." The hearings revealed more uncomfortable truths. The hidden war directives had been developed after a conflict in 2159, called the Melbourne Incident. First contact with an alien species called the Vryn had gone catastrophically wrong. The Vryn were aggressive and powerful. They attacked human colonies without warning. Earth's military at the time was not prepared for interstellar warfare. They lost 12 colonies in 3 months. Over 4 million people died. Humanity eventually won that war, but barely. The victory came at enormous cost. In the aftermath, military planners decided that Earth would never be unprepared again. They created the hidden war directives, secret protocols that prepared humanity for total warfare against any enemy, no matter how powerful. The directives were based on a simple philosophy. If humans were threatened with extinction, all rules were off. Every weapon was acceptable. Every tactic was valid. The only thing that mattered was survival. "We became what we had to become," Admiral Sarah Chen testified. "The universe is not kind. It's not fair. It's full of species that are stronger than us, more advanced than us, more numerous than us. The only advantage we have is that we're willing to do whatever it takes to survive." The Concordat learned that lesson the hard way. But not everyone agreed. The Arkshani species, the insectoids who had suffered most from human cyber warfare, sent a delegation to Earth. They wanted answers. They wanted to understand why humans had tortured their people. Vorntal came with them. He was no longer Supreme Legate. He had been stripped of rank and title after the war. The Supreme Council blamed him for the defeat. He accepted exile on Earth as an alternative to execution. Now he stood in a human courtroom, testifying about the Concordat's perspective. "We thought we were preventing future conflict," Vorntal said. His silver skin had lost its shine. He looked old and tired. Humans were expanding rapidly. They were aggressive in their colonization. They had violent tendencies in their history. We believed that containing them early would prevent a larger war later. "So you decided to threaten our entire species?" Sarah Chen asked. She was in the courtroom as a witness. "You came to our home and told us to submit or die?" "Yes," Vorntal admitted. "It was standard Concordat policy. We had done it with dozens of emerging species. Most of them saw reason and accepted our guidance. We did not expect such fierce resistance. We did not expect such terrible weapons. Did you ever consider just leaving us alone?" Vorntal looked at her directly. "Would you have left us alone? If you had continued expanding, eventually you would have come into conflict with Concordat space. We tried to address the problem before it became a crisis. We were wrong. We underestimated you. And thousands of my people died because of that mistake." There was a famous moment in the hearings that was recorded and replayed across the galaxy. Sarah Chen and Vorntal faced each other across the courtroom, 2 military leaders from different species, both dealing with the consequences of their choices. "You call us savages," Sarah said quietly. "You say we fight without honor, without mercy. You're not wrong, but you made us this way. When you threatened Earth, you gave us 2 choices. Roll over and accept domination, or fight with everything we have. We chose to fight. And yes, we used terrible weapons. We did horrible things, but we're still here. Earth is still free. My species survived. What would you have done in my place? Vorntal was silent for a moment. Then he said something that shocked everyone. The same thing. If my homeworld was threatened, I would use any weapon available. I would do anything to save my people. I understand now. We are not so different. We both did what we thought was necessary. Then maybe, Sarah said, we can find a way to live with what we've done, together. The tribunals continued for months. Some human officers were convicted of war crimes. Others were acquitted. Captain Marcus Webb was found not guilty and reinstated with full honors. The court ruled that he was right to refuse an illegal order. Admiral Sarah Chen was cleared of all charges, but she resigned from military service anyway. She could not continue leading after everything she had ordered. Dr. James Okafor was never charged. His weapons were deemed necessary for Earth's survival. But he began the process of dismantling the worst of them. The Scorch Protocol was destroyed completely. The nanomachine factories were shut down. The psychological warfare compounds were locked away with protocols preventing their use except in the most extreme circumstances. But Earth kept enough capability to defend itself. The hidden war directives remained classified. The stealth ships stayed operational. The hidden weapons platforms in the asteroid belt were maintained. Earth would never be helpless again. Then something unexpected happened. A new signal reached Earth from deep space. It came from a species that had been watching the entire war. They called themselves the Architects. They had a message that would change everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. The message was simple and terrifying. The test is complete. Humanity has passed. The Concordat has failed. Prepare for the next phase. The Architect ships appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. They were massive beyond comprehension, each one the size of a small moon. They looked like they were built from crystallized starlight and mathematics given physical form. Human sensors could barely perceive them. It was like trying to see something that existed in more dimensions than human minds could understand. Admiral Sarah Chen, despite her resignation, was called back to the command center. She stood looking at the impossible ships on her displays. Well, she said quietly, this is new. The Architect's message was broadcast to every planet in both human and Concordat space. Their voice sounded like 1,000 beings speaking in perfect harmony. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. We are the Architects. We have watched your conflict with interest. You were tested. The Galactic Concordat was meant to represent order, civilization, and stability. Humanity was meant to represent chaos, innovation, and aggression. The test was to see which philosophy would prevail when pushed to extremes. Sarah felt ice in her stomach. They were watching. This whole time, the war was a test? The Architects continued. The Concordat failed. They had superior numbers, technology, and resources, but they relied on outdated doctrine and arrogance. They underestimated their enemy and paid the price. Humanity succeeded. You adapted. You innovated. You used tactics we did not predict. You won against overwhelming odds. Across the galaxy, the Concordat Supreme Council listened to the same message. They felt betrayal cut deeper than any human weapon. Their entire civilization had been manipulated, set up to fail. We now extend an offer to humanity, the Architects said. Join us as members of the Inner Council. Help us guide the younger species of the galaxy. Share your military expertise. Show other civilizations how to survive when threatened. You have proven yourselves worthy. The transmission ended. Earth waited for Admiral Chen's response. She was, unofficially, still the voice that spoke for humanity's military policy. Sarah Chen looked at the Architect ships for a long moment. Then she began recording her response. The whole world watched. Architects, she began. I've spent 6 months watching war crimes trials. I've listened to survivors describe what our weapons did to them. I've seen children who can't sleep because of nightmares we gave them. I've watched my own soldiers break down crying when they talk about the things they did. I've looked at the bill for our victory, and it's written in blood and trauma and broken minds. She paused. And you tell me it was a test? You set up the Concordat to attack us? You arranged for millions of people to die just to see what would happen? You orchestrated genocide as an experiment? The Architects did not respond. They just waited. Here's my answer, Sarah said. No, we don't want to join your inner council. We don't want to be your weapon. We don't want to be part of a system that treats entire civilizations like laboratory animals. If your galactic community requires species to prove themselves through bloodshed, Then maybe the galaxy needs to grow up. She leaned forward, staring directly at the camera. We fought your war. We won your test. We paid a terrible price for survival. But we did it to protect our freedom, not to become your attack dogs. If you don't like that answer, you're welcome to try forcing us. You saw what happened to the last people who threatened Earth. The transmission ended. Earth held its breath, waiting to see if the architects would respond with violence. They did not. Instead, a different message came. Interesting. You refuse the reward for passing the test. You reject the system that created the test. This is unexpected. Then the architect ship simply vanished. They did not leave by flying away. They were just suddenly not there anymore, like they had never existed. A final message appeared on every screen across the galaxy. You have chosen your own path. We will not interfere. Pray it leads somewhere better than our design. The next 3 months were chaos. The Concordat government collapsed completely. The Supreme Council was dissolved by popular uprising. Member species declared independence. Some wanted revenge against humanity for what the war had done. Others wanted peace. A few wanted to continue the architect's test to prove they were worthy. But something unexpected happened. 23 former Concordat species announced they were standing with Earth. They rejected the architect's system. They refused to participate in a galactic order based on testing species through manufactured wars. The Arkshani were the first to make the announcement. Their representative, a young philosopher named Kestra, gave a speech that moved billions across the galaxy. We suffered greatly in the war with humanity, she said. Our people were tortured by their weapons. We have every reason to hate them. But we learned something. The architects did not care about our suffering. They arranged it. They wanted to see what would happen. The humans at least feel guilt for what they did. They held trials. They questioned their own actions. They're trying to be better. That's more than the architects ever did. More species joined. The galaxy was restructuring itself around a new principle, not the architect's test-based hierarchy, but something different. A community where species could choose their own paths without being manipulated or tested. Vornthal watched these changes from his exile on Earth. He had a small apartment in Geneva, near where Dr. James Alcafor worked. They met sometimes for coffee and talked about the war. Two old warriors trying to make sense of what they had done. I'm testifying at the Concordat war crimes trials, Vornthal said one day. They're charging the Supreme Council members who ordered the attack on Earth. I'm going to tell the truth about how it happened. How we knew humans might be dangerous but attacked anyway to make an example. That takes courage, James said. Your own people might hate you for it. They already hate me for losing the war, Vornthal replied. At least this way, something good comes from my testimony. Maybe it prevents the next war. James was quiet for a moment. I'm dismantling my laboratory, destroying my research. I never want anyone to build weapons like mine again. But you're keeping some of it, Vornthal observed. Earth still has the hidden war directives. Yes, James admitted. We keep enough to defend ourselves. But we're trying to make sure those weapons are only used as a last resort, not a first option. 10 years passed. The galaxy settled into a new normal. Earth became a hub for species seeking alternatives to the old hierarchies. The hidden war directives remained classified but unused. They were a sleeping deterrent, a promise that anyone who threatened Earth would face the same fate as the Concordat. Admiral Sarah Chen, truly retired now, taught at the Earth Defense Academy. She taught military ethics. She made every student study the war with the Concordat in detail. They learned about the weapons humanity used. They learned about the consequences. They learned about the price of victory. War is easy, she told her students. Any idiot can start a war. The hard part is living with what you had to do to win. The hard part is looking at yourself in the mirror afterward and recognizing the person you see. A memorial was built in Geneva. It listed every name of every person who died in the war, human and alien, soldier and civilian. Millions of names carved into black stone. At the base was an inscription in dozens of languages. They died because we failed to find peace. May their deaths teach us to try harder next time. On the anniversary of the war's end, representatives from Earth and former Concordat worlds gathered at the memorial. They laid flowers. They spoke names. They remembered. Captain Marcus Webb stood in his uniform, now an admiral himself. He commanded the new peacekeeping force that patrolled the border regions between human and alien space. Next to him stood a young Arkshani officer named Tusken, who served as his executive officer. They were friends. Their species had fought a brutal war, but their generation was building something better. Do you think it was worth it? Tiskin asked quietly. All the death, all the suffering. Was survival worth that price? Marcus considered the question carefully. I don't know. Survival is necessary, but the cost was terrible. We won, but we lost parts of ourselves winning. We became creatures capable of such cruelty. I think the real question is not whether it was worth it, but what we do now. Do we learn from it? Do we become better? Or do we just prepare for the next war? What do you think we should do? I think, Marcus said slowly, we should remember. Remember what we did. Remember what it cost. Remember that victory is not the end of the story. Living with victory, that's the hard part. Making sure we don't have to do it again, that's the important part. They stood together in silence, human and alien, looking at the names of the dead. Somewhere in deep space, the architects watched. They had withdrawn from active involvement in galactic affairs, but they still observed. They saw humanity struggling with the consequences of their victory. They saw species trying to build something better than the old system. One architect said to another in a language that existed beyond normal dimensions, "They surprised us. They won the test but rejected the reward. They're trying to create their own path. Will they succeed?" asked another. Unknown. But it will be interesting to observe. They chose the harder path. Growth through conscience rather than domination. Evolution through cooperation rather than testing. It may fail, but if it succeeds, it will be better than anything we designed. On Earth, in a small classroom in Geneva, a young human student raised her hand. She was 10 years old with bright eyes and endless curiosity. "Teacher Chen," she asked, "my mom says you were a great warrior, that you saved Earth. Is that true?" Sarah looked at the girl and thought about how to answer. "I did what I thought was necessary. A lot of people saved Earth. A lot of people paid terrible prices so you could sit in this classroom safely. I helped, yes. But great. I don't know about that. But you won," the girl insisted. "You beat the bad aliens." "We won," Sarah agreed. "But winning is not the same as being right. We survived. We're free. But we did things I hope you never have to do. That's why I teach this class. So you'll know the truth about war. It's not glorious. It's not clean. It's necessary sometimes, but it's always terrible. The real victory is not fighting the war. The real victory is building a world where the war wasn't necessary in the first place." The girl thought about that. "So we should try to make peace?" "Yes," Sarah said. "We should always try for peace first. But we should also be ready to fight if we must. That's the burden we carry. We're strong enough to win wars. We need to be wise enough to prevent them." Outside the classroom window, ships from a dozen different species flew through Earth's sky, human and alien, working together, building something new, something better. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still disagreements, still the occasional threat of violence, but it was better than war. It was a start, and sometimes a start is enough.